The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had stood for 12,000 years. Its crystal towers reached toward the stars, and its walls had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. 100 different species sat in their designated seats, representing 10,000 worlds across the galaxy. This was the center of all power, the place where the fate of civilizations was decided. Ambassador Bakathari of the Zentari Collective had attended thousands of sessions in this hall. He had seen wars ended and treaties signed. He had watched species join the council and others fade into extinction. Nothing surprised him anymore. Or so he thought. Today was different. Today, the hall was quieter than he had ever heard it. The usual whispered conversations and political scheming had stopped completely. Every eye, every sensor, every attention was focused on the central podium where the human delegation stood. Humanity had joined the council only 43 years ago. In galactic terms, this was nothing. The Zentari had been members for 6,000 years. The Velith Dominion had helped found the council itself. Humans were newcomers, barely more than children in the eyes of the older races. They were strange creatures, these humans. They came from a small blue planet on the outer edge of an unremarkable galaxy. They had no natural weapons, no protective shells, no ability to survive in vacuum. By all logic, they should have died out long before reaching the stars. But they had not died. Instead, they had spread across 200 star systems in less than a century. They built ships that matched the fastest vessels of ancient races. They solved problems that had confused Zentari scientists for millennia. The older species found humans amusing at first. Their stubborn refusal to accept impossible odds was entertaining. Their attachment to individual lives was strange but harmless. Their concept of hope seemed almost childish to beings who had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore. But now, watching the human ambassadors step up to the podium, Vecthari felt something he had not experienced in centuries. He felt worried. Daniel Porter was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore the simple uniform of the United Earth Federation, with no medals or decorations. His face showed no emotion as he looked out at the assembled delegates. When he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he began, "I come before you today with a message from the people of Earth and all human colonies." The hall remained silent. Even the environmental systems seemed to have quieted, as if the building itself was listening, effective immediately. "The United Earth Federation is withdrawing from the Galactic Council." The silence shattered. Delegates rose from their seats, shouting in dozens of languages. Translation devices struggled to keep up with the chaos. Vecthari's 3 hearts began beating faster, pumping cold blood through his body. As his mind tried to process what he had just heard, no species had ever voluntarily left the council. Not once in 12,000 years. Species had been expelled for crimes against the galactic community. Species had been destroyed in wars. But no one had ever simply walked away. High Chancellor Mordana of the Velith Dominion rose from her floating throne. Her skin glowed with bioluminescent patterns that showed her agitation. She was one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, leader of a species that had ruled the stars when humans were still living in caves. "Ambassador Porter," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "This is impossible. You cannot simply leave. There are treaties, agreements, obligations that bind your species to this council." Porter waited for the noise to die down before responding. "All treaties are hereby suspended. All joint ventures are terminated. All agreements are void. Council species have 30 standard days to remove their citizens and assets from human-controlled space." "This is madness," shouted Delegate Crixon of the Formian Hive. His insectoid body clicked and rattled with anger. "What possible reason could you have for this action?" Porter reached into his jacket and removed a small crystal. He placed it on the podium, and it began to glow softly. "This crystal contains records," he said. "Complete records of council actions against humanity over the past 40 years. He paused, letting the words settle over the assembly like a cold fog. "The sabotage of 17 human colony ships. resulting in the deaths of 42,000 civilians. The theft of our medical research, which was then sold back to us at prices we could barely afford. The assassination of 37 of our leading scientists, made to look like accidents or natural causes. The economic blockades disguised as health quarantines, designed to keep our colonies poor and dependent. The hall had gone quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. This was the silence of guilt. The Galactic Council has made its position clear, Porter continued. Humanity is to be tolerated, not welcomed. Used, not respected. Contained, not allowed to grow. We have tried for 4 decades to earn your acceptance. We have shared our technology, our medicine, our knowledge. We have asked only to be treated as equals. His aide, a young woman named Catherine Ellis, stepped forward and began distributing data crystals to each delegation. Her movements were precise and efficient, her face showing no emotion. She had been trained for this moment, just as the entire human delegation had been trained. The proof is in these crystals, Porter said. Every transaction, every communication, every secret order given by council members to undermine human interests. We are very good at finding information that others wish to keep hidden. Victheri took the crystal that was offered to him. It felt heavy in his hand, heavier than its small size should have allowed. He knew, without having to check, that the records it contained would be accurate. Humans were many things, but they were not liars. The human delegation turned and began walking toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the silent hall. At the doorway, Porter stopped and looked back at the assembled delegates. 30 days, he said. After that, any council vessel entering human space will be considered hostile. Our borders will be closed. Our communications will be silent. We will have nothing more to do with the Galactic Council. He paused, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. It might have been sadness. It might have been anger. It was impossible to tell. We did not want this, he said quietly. We wanted to be your friends, your partners, your allies. But you made it clear that would never be possible. So we will go our own way. Good luck with whatever comes next. The doors sealed behind the human delegation with a sound like a tomb closing. The silence that followed was the deepest the great hall had ever known. Victheri looked down at the crystal in his hand, then at the empty podium where Ambassador Porter had stood. He thought about all the times he had heard other delegates mock humans, calling them primitive, emotional, short-lived creatures who would never amount to anything significant. He thought about how wrong they had all been. High Chancellor Mordana cleared her throat, trying to restore order to the session. But her voice was shaky, and her bioluminescent skin had dimmed to almost nothing. This is a temporary situation, she said, though she did not sound convinced. The humans will realize their mistake. They need us more than we need them. They will come back. Victheri said nothing. But in his 3 hearts, he knew that something fundamental had just changed. The galaxy would never be the same again. And he suspected that the Council had just made the worst mistake in its 12,000-year history. The session was adjourned without any decisions being made. Delegates wandered out of the hall in small groups, speaking in hushed voices. The air itself seemed heavier, as if gravity had increased when no one was looking. The countdown had begun. 30 days until the humans closed their borders forever. No one knew what would happen next. But everyone knew it would not be good. 3 days had passed since the humans walked out of the Galactic Council. In that time, the delegates had moved from shock to anger to something that looked very much like confidence. After all, humanity was a small species. They controlled only 200 star systems out of the millions that made up council space. How much damage could their departure really cause? The emergency session was called on the morning of the 4th day. Delegates arrived expecting to discuss how to punish the humans for their disrespect. Some talked about economic sanctions. Others suggested military action. The Formian Hive wanted to blockade human space and starve them into submission. Chief Economic Advisor Zelthrix of the Kethany Republic stood before the assembly with a different message. She was a thin creature with silver skin and 6 arms. And her species was known throughout the galaxy for their skill with numbers and trade. When she spoke, other species listened. because Kethany economics had guided the council for 3,000 years. Today, her voice was trembling. "Honored delegates," she began, "I must share information that will be difficult to hear. Please save your questions until I have finished." She activated the holographic display system, and numbers began floating in the air above her head. Graphs and charts appeared, showing trade routes and supply chains that connected thousands of worlds. "Let me start with quantum processors," she said. "These devices are essential for faster-than-light communication, ship navigation, and weapons targeting systems. Without them, modern galactic civilization cannot function." She touched one of the floating graphs, and it expanded to fill the entire hall. Human corporations supply 73% of all quantum processors used in council shipyards. They developed a manufacturing technique that we have been unable to copy despite 15 years of trying. Our engineers believe they do something during production that we cannot detect or understand. Murmurs began spreading through the assembly, but Zelthrix continued. "Without human processors, our ability to build new ships will drop by 60% within 6 months. Maintenance of existing vessels will become impossible within a year. Our military and civilian fleets will slowly become unusable." Delegate Crixon of the Formians stood up. "We will simply find alternatives. Other species can learn to make these processors." Zelthrix's silver skin darkened with what might have been frustration. "The Kethany Republic has employed our best scientists on this problem for over a decade. We have made no progress. The humans are doing something we simply cannot replicate. We do not even understand what questions to ask." She moved to another graph, this one showing medical supply routes. Human pharmaceutical companies hold patents on treatments for diseases affecting 42 council member species. The Velith depend on human-made medicines to treat a degenerative nerve condition that affects 1 in 10 of their population. The Formians use human antibiotics to protect their hive nurseries from a fungal infection. The Zentari require human enzyme supplements to digest certain foods. Vicari felt his stomach clench. He had been taking those supplements every day for 20 years. He had never thought about where they came from. Furthermore, Zelthrix continued, human engineers designed and maintain the primary communication relays that connect the Outer Rim territories to the core worlds. Without these relays, dozens of colony planets will be isolated. They will not be able to call for help or receive supplies. Some may not survive. High Chancellor Mordana rose from her throne. "Surely we can find engineers from other species to maintain these relays. The humans upgraded those relays with technology they developed themselves. Our engineers have studied the systems but cannot understand how they work. When human technicians leave, the relays will eventually fail, and we have no way to repair them." The hall was silent now. The earlier confidence draining away like water through sand. Zelthrix pulled up one final chart. This one showed financial flows across the galaxy. Billions of transactions per day moving wealth from one species to another. "There's one more thing," she said, and her voice had dropped to almost a whisper. "For the past 30 years, human investment firms have been quietly purchasing debt across the galaxy. They have bought bonds, loans, and financial instruments from every major council species. In many cases, they purchased debt that was considered worthless, paying very little for it." She paused, looking around the hall. "That debt is now being called in. The humans are demanding full payment on all outstanding obligations. The total amount owed to human financial institutions is approximately 47 trillion galactic credits. The chaos that followed was unlike anything the Council had seen before. Delegates screamed at each other, pointing fingers and making accusations. The Formians blamed the Velith for allowing humans to gain so much economic power. The Velith accused the Cathani of failing to notice the danger. The Zentari simply sat in their seats, too stunned to speak. Vekthari watched the madness unfold around him. He thought about all the years the Council had spent manipulating human trade agreements, ensuring that humanity stayed poor and dependent. They had believed they were in control. They had never noticed that the humans were playing a different game entirely, outside the Great Hall. Reports were already coming in from across the galaxy. Human merchant ships were departing from every major port. They were taking their crews, their cargo, and their expertise with them. Mining colonies reported that human engineers had left without warning, abandoning equipment that no one else knew how to operate. Hospitals were running low on medicines that only human factories could produce. Ambassador Vecthory quietly left the session while others were still arguing. He walked to his private office and sat in the darkness. Thinking about everything he had just learned, the humans had not left in anger, he realized. They had left according to a plan. A plan that had been in place for years, perhaps decades, while the Council had been busy looking down on humanity, treating them as inferior beings to be managed and controlled. The humans had been quietly making themselves central to galactic civilization, and now they were removing themselves from the equation, letting the Council see exactly how much they had depended on a species they considered beneath them. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. And it was working perfectly. Vecthory activated his communication device and began sending messages to his government back home. The Zentari needed to start preparing for difficult times ahead. They needed to begin rationing their enzyme supplements. They needed to find alternative suppliers for essential goods. But even as he sent these messages, he knew it was probably too late. The humans had been preparing for this for decades. The Council had been blind for just as long. There was no way to catch up now. On his desk sat the data crystal that Ambassador Porter had provided. Vecthory had not yet found the courage to review its contents. He did not want to see the proof of what the Council had done. He did not want to know exactly how badly his people had behaved toward a species that had only ever asked to be treated with respect. But he would have to look eventually. They all would, because understanding what went wrong was the first step toward fixing it. And if there was any hope of fixing this situation, they needed to start soon. 27 days remained until the humans closed their borders. Already, it felt like far too little time. The galaxy was beginning to understand what it had lost, and the lesson was going to be painful. By the 15th day, panic had spread to every corner of Council space. The Outer Rim communication network went dark on day 12. These relay stations had connected 37 colony worlds to the rest of galactic civilization. They had been upgraded by human engineers 10 years ago using technology that no one else understood. When the last human technician left on day 11, the stations kept working for another day. Then something failed, and no one knew how to fix it. 30-7 worlds went silent overnight. Some of these colonies had populations of millions. Others were small research outposts or mining operations. All of them were now cut off from the rest of the galaxy, unable to call for help or receive supplies. The Council sent emergency repair teams to the relay stations. Engineers from 6 different species worked together, trying to restore the communication network. After 3 days of effort, they had made no progress. The human technology was beyond their understanding. It was like asking a child to repair a nuclear reactor. On day 14, the Zelthrix Pharmaceutical Corporation made an announcement that sent shockwaves across Council space. They were rationing all medicines manufactured by human companies. Current supplies would last approximately 8 weeks if consumption was cut in half. After that, there would be nothing. Hospitals across the galaxy began reporting shortages. Patients who depended on human-made treatments were sent home with limited supplies and advice to make their medicine last as long as possible. Some species began hoarding, buying up whatever stocks remained and driving prices to impossible levels. The first deaths came on day 15. 3 elderly Valith citizens died when their nerve treatment ran out. A Formian nursery lost an entire generation of larvae to the fungal infection that human antibiotics had kept under control. A Zentari diplomat collapsed during a council meeting when his enzyme supplements failed to arrive. These deaths were small in number compared to galactic populations, but they were only the beginning. Everyone knew that worse was coming. High Chancellor Mordana called yet another emergency session. She looked decades older than she had 2 weeks before. Her bioluminescent skin had faded to a dull gray, and her movements were slow and tired. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier. "We have attempted to contact the United Earth Federation through every available channel," she said. "They do not respond. Our diplomatic vessels are turned away at the border. Our messages go unanswered." She paused, gathering her strength. We sent a delegation to their embassy on Neutral Station 7. The building was empty. They had removed everything, including the furniture. There was nothing left but bare walls and a single message written on the floor. She activated the holographic display, showing an image of the empty embassy. On the floor, in large letters, someone had painted a simple message: "You should have been kinder." Delegate Crixon slammed his front legs against his desk. Enough of this. We should send a military fleet and force them to negotiate. They cannot ignore warships on their borders. Factory rose from his seat, something he rarely did during council sessions. "You are a fool," he said, his translator conveying his cold anger. "Have you learned nothing in the past 2 weeks?" The Formian delegate turned toward him, mandibles clicking with rage. "You dare insult me?" "I dare to speak the truth, which apparently no one else will do." Vicari moved to the center of the hall, addressing the entire assembly. "My intelligence service has been monitoring human military developments for the past decade. I have just received their complete report." He activated his own holographic display, showing images of human warships that no council member had ever seen before. "The humans have weapons we do not understand. They have ships faster than anything in council fleets. They have defensive systems that our weapons cannot penetrate. For the past 3 years, they have been positioning these forces along their borders. They were preparing for exactly this situation." The images showed human battle cruisers with strange equipment mounted on their hulls. Energy readings that suggested power levels far beyond anything the council had developed. Ships that seemed to shimmer and flicker, as if they existed partially in another dimension. "If we send military forces to human space, we will not be negotiating. We will be starting a war that we cannot win." Got their eye. Let that statement hang in the air. The humans spent 40 years pretending to be weaker than they were. They let us believe we were superior. They watched us sabotage their colonies and kill their scientists, and they said nothing. They were waiting. Mordana's voice was barely a whisper. Waiting for what? Waiting until they were strong enough to leave on their own terms. Waiting until we could not stop them. Vicari returned to his seat. "We are not dealing with a primitive species that got lucky among the stars. We're dealing with a civilization that planned this moment for decades and executed their plan perfectly." The council chamber fell into a heavy silence. Delegates who had been calling for military action now sat quietly, reconsidering their positions. The reality of their situation was becoming clear. Meanwhile, in human space, life continued as normal. Freighters moved between colonies carrying goods produced in human factories. Hospitals used medicines from human laboratories. Children attended schools that taught human history and human values. The United Earth. Federation had spent 40 years building an economy that did not need the council. They had created redundant systems for everything. Multiple suppliers for every resource. Multiple routes for every trade lane. Multiple solutions for every problem. They had learned long ago that depending on others was dangerous. The council had taught them that lesson well. Ambassador Daniel Porter sat in his office on Earth, watching the chaos unfold through intercepted communications. His walls were covered with screens showing news feeds from across the galaxy. Riots on Velith Prime. Food shortages in the Formian colonies. Economic collapse in Kethany markets. Catherine Ellis entered the room with a datapad. "The latest intelligence summary," she said, handing it to him. Porter reviewed the information quickly. "The Velith are blaming the Formians for the crisis. The Zentari are withdrawing from joint defense agreements. The Kethany economy has lost 40% of its value in 2 weeks. And still no one is asking the right question," Ellis said. Porter nodded. "They are asking how to make us come back. They're asking how to punish us for leaving. They're asking how to survive without us." He set down the datapad and looked out the window at the blue sky of Earth. "No one is asking why we left. No one is examining their own behavior. You think they ever will?" Porter considered the question carefully. "Some of them eventually. The smart ones will figure it out. Ambassador Vakthar might be one of them. He seems to actually be thinking about what happened instead of just reacting to it. And the others? The others will continue blaming everyone except themselves. They will say we were ungrateful, that we betrayed their trust, that we owed them loyalty." Porter smiled, but there was no happiness in it. They will learn nothing, and they will make the same mistakes again with the next young species that joins the galactic community. Ella sat down across from him. Is that why we did this? To teach them a lesson? We did this because we had no choice, Porter replied. They were never going to accept us as equals. They were always going to treat us as servants to be used and discarded. The only question was whether we would accept that forever or do something about it. He turned back to the screens, showing the chaos across the galaxy. The lesson is a bonus. Whether they learn from it is up to them. 15 days had passed. 15 days remained. The galaxy was learning, slowly and painfully, that the species they had dismissed as primitive and inferior had been playing a much longer game than anyone had realized. The humans could afford to wait. They had all the time in the world. The Council did not. Day 23 brought a single ship to the human border. Ambassador Viketsari had made his decision 3 days earlier, during another useless council session where delegates screamed at each other instead of looking for solutions. He had watched High Chancellor Mordana try to restore order while the Formians accused the Valith of incompetence, and the Cathani demanded compensation for their economic losses. No one was working together. No one was even trying. Vekthari had quietly left the session, returned to his personal vessel, and set course for human space. He did not tell anyone where he was going, did not ask permission from his government. He simply left. His ship was small, barely larger than a shuttle, with no weapons and no military equipment. He broadcast on all frequencies as he approached the border, announcing that he was alone and wished to speak with human authorities. Then he stopped his engines and waited. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Vekthari sat in his pilot seat, watching the empty darkness of space and wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. Perhaps the humans would simply ignore him. Perhaps they would destroy his ship as a warning to others. Perhaps this entire journey was pointless then. Without warning, human warship appeared. It was called the Constellation, and it was larger than any vessel Vikari had ever seen. Its hull was covered with weapons and sensors that his instruments could not identify. It seemed to shimmer slightly, as if it existed in multiple dimensions at once. Just looking at it made his eyes hurt. A voice came through his communication system. Ambassador Vekthari, this is Captain Lisa Hernandez of the Constellation. You have requested an audience with human authorities. The request has been granted. Relief flooded through Vekthari's body. Thank you, Captain. I am grateful. Do not thank me yet, Hernandez replied. You will be escorted to a neutral meeting point. Follow the assigned course exactly. Any deviation will be considered hostile action, and you will be destroyed. Is that clear? It's perfectly clear. A navigation route appeared on his console, leading to a small moon in an unclaimed system. Vekthari engaged his engines and followed the path, with the Constellation hovering behind him like a predator watching its prey. The journey took 4 hours. During that time, Vekthari tried to prepare what he would say. He had practiced speeches in his mind, arguments and explanations that might convince the humans to reconsider their decision. But every time he thought he had the right words, he realized how hollow they sounded. What could he possibly say that would matter? The Council had spent 40 years mistreating humanity. It had sabotaged their ships, stolen their research, killed their scientists. Words alone could not fix that. The moon was a barren rock with no atmosphere and no life. A small structure had been built on its surface. A simple building with lights in its windows. Vekthari landed his ship nearby and walked across the dusty surface to the entrance. Inside, he found a plain room with a table and 2 chairs. Nothing else. No decorations, no technology, no comforts. Just a place for 2 beings to sit and talk. Waiting for him was a human woman he did not recognize. She had gray hair and sharp eyes, and she wore a simple uniform with no markings of rank or position. I am Director Margaret Sullivan, she said. I oversee human intelligence operations. Please sit. Vekthari lowered himself into the chair, folding his 4 legs awkwardly beneath him. The furniture was designed for humans, not Zentari. You wondered if that was intentional. I came to understand why humanity has taken this action, he said. The Council wishes to negotiate. Sullivan smiled, and it reminded Vekthari of something dangerous. The Council wishes to restore the old arrangement. They want humans to return to our previous role, a convenient source of labor, technology, and resources. A species to be used and discarded as needed. That is not Ambassador. Sullivan leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. I have recordings of council deliberations going back 30 years. I have evidence of every plot, every scheme, every quiet agreement to limit human expansion. I know about the ships your people sabotaged. I know about the colonies you poisoned. I know about the researchers you murdered and made it look like accidents. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over him. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending you do not know what happened. You may not have given the orders personally, but you knew. Everyone in the council knew, and no one did anything to stop it. Vectheri was silent for a long moment. The translator device around his neck struggled to convey the complex emotions he was feeling. Shame, guilt, fear, regret. I was not part of those decisions, he finally said, but you are right. I knew they were happening. I did nothing. Why not? The question hung in the air between them. Vectheri thought about all the justifications he had told himself, the years. That it was not his responsibility. That he was just one ambassador among many. That the council knew best. All of those excuses felt hollow now, because we were afraid, he admitted. Humanity rose too quickly. In less than a century, you went from primitive rockets to matching our fastest ships. You solved problems that had confused us for thousands of years. You looked at impossible challenges and simply refused to accept that they were impossible. Sullivan nodded slowly. And that frightened you. It terrified us. The admission seemed to drain something from Vectheri. A species that does not know its own limits is a species that cannot be controlled. So we tried to slow your growth. We tried to keep you dependent on us. We never imagined you would simply leave. Perhaps that was your mistake, Sullivan said. You saw our persistence as a threat. You never considered that it might also make us the most loyal allies you could ever have. If you had simply treated us with respect. Vectheri's bioluminescent markings flickered with colors that the translator could not interpret. He was feeling things he had no words for in any language. I have reviewed your intelligence file, Sullivan continued. You voted against several of the proposals that harmed humanity. You argued in private meetings that the council was making a mistake. You were overruled every time. I should have done more. Yes, you should have. Sullivan's voice was not cruel, but it was honest. But you are here now. That counts for something. I came to ask a question, Vectheri said. What would it take to begin again? Sullivan studied him for a long moment. That is the first intelligent thing any council member has said in the past 3 weeks. She stood up and walked to the window. Looking out at the barren landscape of the moon, humanity does not want revenge, she said. We are not interested in punishing the council. We simply want to be left alone, to build our own civilization in peace. But you have made yourselves essential to the galactic economy. If you stay isolated, millions will suffer. Millions are already suffering. That is the consequence of the council's choices over the past 40 years. Sullivan turned back to face him. We did not create this crisis. The council created it by making themselves dependent on a species they refused to treat as equals. We are simply no longer willing to carry a burden that was never fairly placed on our shoulders. Vectheri considered her words carefully. Is there any path forward? Any way to repair what has been broken? Sullivan returned to her chair. That depends entirely on the council. Are they willing to admit what they did wrong? Are they willing to change? Or will they continue to blame humanity for their own failures? I cannot speak for the entire council, but you can speak for yourself. And you can speak to others who might be willing to listen. Sullivan leaned back in her chair. Go back to the council, Ambassador. Tell them what you learned here today. Show them that accountability is the first step toward healing. She paused, considering something. Ambassador Porter is preparing a message that will be broadcast across the galaxy in 7 days. You may want to be present when it airs. The future of your relationship with humanity will depend on how the council responds. Vectheri rose from his chair, his legs unsteady beneath him. Thank you, Director Sullivan. For your honesty, if nothing else. Thank you for coming alone and unarmed, Ambassador. It took courage. She stood and extended her hand in the human gesture of farewell. I hope we can meet again under better circumstances. Vakatheri reached out and clasped her hand with his upper right arm. It was an awkward gesture for a Zentari, but it felt right. So do I, he said. So do I. On day 30, the deadline arrived. Throughout Council space, billions of beings held their breath. Military fleets had been placed on high alert. Emergency shelters had been stocked with supplies. Governments had prepared their citizens for the possibility of war. Everyone expected violence. Everyone expected the humans to strike. Instead, they received a message. Ambassador Daniel Porter appeared on every screen. Every display, every communication device across the galaxy. The broadcast cut through all other signals, overriding news feeds and entertainment channels and private conversations. For one moment, every being in Council space saw the same face and heard the same voice. Porter stood in a simple room with a blue banner behind him, showing the seal of the Facility United Earth Federation. He wore his usual plain uniform, and his expression was calm and serious. Behind him stood a row of human officials, men and women representing every branch of their government. Citizens of the Galactic Council, he began. 30 days ago, humanity withdrew from your organization. Many of you assumed this was an act of aggression. Many of you expected war. You were wrong. He paused, letting the words settle across billions of worlds. For 40 years, we tried to earn your acceptance. We shared our technology freely. We gave you our medical research without demanding payment. We offered our knowledge and our friendship to any species that would accept it. We asked only one thing in return, to be treated as equals. The recording shifted to show images that made viewers across the galaxy gasp. Human colony ships torn apart by mysterious explosions. Research facilities destroyed in fires that investigators had called accidental. Scientists dying in hospital beds from diseases that should have been easily treated. Instead of friendship, we received sabotage. Instead of respect, we received contempt. Instead of equality, we received a message that was never spoken aloud but was always clear. Humans are useful, but they are not important. Humans can be used, but they cannot be trusted. Humans should serve the Council, not stand beside it. Porter's expression darkened for a moment. We could have responded with anger. We could have responded with violence. Many of our people wanted exactly that. They wanted revenge for the ships you destroyed, the people you killed, dreams you crushed under your feet without a second thought. He took a breath and continued. We chose a different path. We chose to show you what you would lose without us. In these 30 days, the Galactic Council has nearly torn itself apart. Economies have collapsed. People have died for lack of medicine. Worlds have gone silent because no one could maintain the systems we built. And all of this happened, Ned, because you could not imagine a galaxy without human participation. The background behind Porter changed again, this time showing star maps and diagrams. We do not want to be your enemies. We never did. We want to be your partners, your friends, your allies. But partnership requires equality. Friendship requires trust. Alliance requires mutual respect. He stepped forward, closer to the camera, so that his face filled the screens of viewers across the galaxy. Today, humanity announces the formation of the new Galactic Compact. Membership is open to any species that commits to principles of equality, transparency, and mutual respect. There will be no hidden councils, no secret agreements, no manipulation of trade or technology. All voices will be heard. All species will be valued. Behind him, the human officials parted to reveal a figure that made Council viewers gasp with surprise. Ambassador Vakthari of the Zentari Collective walked forward to stand beside Porter. Ambassador Vakthari came to us alone, Porter explained. He came not to demand or threaten, but to listen and learn. He admitted the failures of his people and asked how we might begin again. Vakthari stepped to the front, his translator converting his words for all to understand. For too long, the older races of this galaxy have treated younger species as children to be managed and threats to be contained. We were wrong. Humanity has taught us that strength comes not from age or power, but from the willingness to stand for what is right. Even when standing alone, he looked directly into the camera. Addressing his own people and all the species who had joined in suppressing humanity, I was part of the system that harmed these people. I knew what was being done, and I did nothing to stop it. That guilt will stay with me for the rest of my life, but I can choose what I do next. I choose to stand with humanity. I choose to help build something better. Porter placed his hand on Victory's shoulder in a gesture of solidarity that crossed all species boundaries. The choice is yours, Porter said to the watching galaxy. Continue fighting over the scraps of the old order, or join us in building something new. We have proven that we can survive alone, but we would rather not have to. The message ended. Across council space, silence fell as billions of beings tried to process what they had just seen. High Chancellor Mordana sat in her private chambers. Watching the replay of Porter's message for the 5th time, her skin had regained some of its glow, but her eyes were tired and old. They are offering us a way out, she said quietly to her advisors. They are offering forgiveness. It is a trap, one advisor insisted. They want to replace the council with their own organization. They want to rule the galaxy. No, Mordana shook her head slowly. If they wanted to rule, they would have attacked while we were weak. They would have used their military superiority to conquer rather than negotiate. They are doing something we never expected. What is that, High Chancellor? They are being kind. She stood and walked to her window, looking out at the city below. They are showing us mercy that we never showed them. And that frightens me more than any weapon ever could. In the following days, ships began arriving at human borders. They were not warships, but diplomatic vessels, merchant freighters, and passenger transports. They came from dozens of worlds, carrying delegates who wanted to learn about the new compact. Some came with genuine interest in building a better future. Others came out of desperation, hoping to restore the trade relationships their economies depended on. A few came simply because they had always believed the Council was wrong to treat humanity so poorly. The Cathani were among the first to formally join the new compact. Their economy had suffered the worst damage, and they had the most to gain from restored trade. But their representative also delivered a public apology for the role, Cathani, financial institutions had played in restricting human economic growth. The Zentari followed soon after. Ambassador Vakthari had convinced his government that the future lay with humanity, not with the dying council. Other species watched to see what would happen to these early members. What they saw surprised them. Human traders returned to Cathani ports, bringing processors and medicines and technology. Human engineers helped Zentari colonies repair damaged systems. The humans asked for fair payment, but did not demand the unfair terms. They could easily have imposed. They were showing the galaxy what partnership actually looked like. Within a year, the new compact had more members than the old council. Within 5 years, it had become the dominant political structure in the galaxy. The council itself dissolved quietly, its members joining the compact one by one. Ambassador Daniel Porter retired to a small house on Earth, overlooking the ocean. Catherine Ellis took over as the lead diplomat for humanity's relations with other species. She proved to be even more skilled than her mentor, guiding the compact through challenges that would have destroyed lesser organizations, and at the heart of it all stood humanity. No longer the newcomers struggling for acceptance, no longer the outsiders being managed and controlled. They had become the architects of a new galactic order built on the principles they had carried with them from a small blue planet at the edge of an unremarkable galaxy. Persistence, hope, the refusal to accept that anything was impossible. They had walked alone into the darkness, and they had emerged carrying a light bright enough to illuminate the entire galaxy. High Chancellor Mordana lived long enough to see the transformation complete. In her final years, she often thought about the message that had been painted on the floor of the abandoned human embassy. You should have been kinder. She had spent her whole life believing that power came from strength and control. Humanity had taught her that true power came from something else entirely. It came from the courage to forgive and the wisdom to build rather than destroy. The galaxy was forever changed. And for once, the change was for the better.